You're gonna move? You're just gonna you're gonna go over there. Cool. You're gonna go in your bed. Good morning, Abby. It's Monday, and spoiler alert, I actually filmed these on Sunday, or at least I have been filming them on Sunday the last few weeks, and then I scheduled them to go live on Monday. So good morning. It's Monday, and something interesting actually happened to me today during my typical Sunday morning routine where I take myself to breakfast and then I go to a coffee shop and I write. I typically listen to a very specific podcast. And this particular podcast is actually structured in a way where the host does a focus group with actual human, regular, normal people. And they do a focus group specifically around politics. And now this video is not about politics, although I can yell and scream about politics all day long. This particular video is not about politics. Anyway, on the focus group today, the host had a guest who is a very bright young lady who happens to be a member of Gen Z. And the conversation this week that they actually did the focus group on and had participants respond was around Gen Z and the gender gap, specifically with Gen Z females. And the focus groups were split into two groups: progressive Gen Z females and more conservative Gen Z females. But a topic kept coming up over and over and over again, and it was the gender divide in Gen Z. And it was really interesting to listen to this particular episode because while on one hand, it's about politics and how Gen Z thinks and how they vote and the issues that they care about, but on the other hand, it was really about the mental state of our younger Gen Z siblings. And the guest on this episode said something during the podcast, which sparked me creating this video. Actually, it sparked me going down a rabbit hole, which eventually led to me creating this video. But she said that Gen Z really has been split into two different groups. There's Group A and Group B. And Group A, Gen Z Group A, is Gen Z that experienced COVID post high school. So they were in college or in their final year of college or just about to graduate college. And Group B Gen Z are our younger generational siblings that were in either middle school or high school during COVID, and how you experienced COVID as a member of Gen Z, depending on if you were Group A or Group B, really dictated your viewpoint and your way to like process the world that's happening around us. And it sent me down this rabbit hole of the impact that COVID had, not just on Gen Z, although the rabbit hole that I went down was specifically about Gen Z, but it sent me down this rabbit hole of how the impact that COVID had on all of us is not something that really, it's not something that we really sit with and actually like think about the impact that it had on us. I was talking to Melissa a couple weeks back, and the conversation was random things, but it eventually led to post COVID and how we're never really going to go back to being what we were, which is a good thing because what we were pre-COVID was not anything good, but it didn't really turn us into something a little bit more positive post-COVID, and we didn't really actually deal with the mental health impact of what it meant to go through COVID, to be isolated from one another, to go through a global pandemic that none of us had ever been through before, and to be separated from the people we love, and to watch some of those people that we love die and to not even get a chance to properly mourn them. There were people in my life who were very frustrated with COVID because they were in college and they didn't get a chance to experience the typical college experience where you walk on stage because we were all separated, and that really changed their viewpoint for a while, and they went down a more conservative rabbit hole. But I think they're starting to come back, thank the Lord. I know I said that this wasn't about politics, but it kind of is, because the host on the show mentioned that like these kids in like middle school and high school, these Gen Z kids at the time, the only form of government that they knew was Joe Biden. They were coming out of Donald Trump and going into to Joe Biden, and a lot of them blame the Democrats and Joe Biden for their experience. You already know how I feel about the politics surrounding COVID, and who's to blame and how much of that blame falls on one person and another. But it doesn't matter. The lived experience of these kids really changed their perception of the members of political parties that they turn and support. And so many of Gen Z, specifically so many of Gen Z men, have gravitated towards the conservative right and the conservative movement because it really gives them someone to blame and someone to take all of that anger and that frustration to point at and say it's your fault. It's your fault. I should blame you for that. And one of the other things that was brought up during that conversation was this isolation, that these kids have, and that how so many of them, high school and middle school and high school is really that time where you develop these like interpersonal social skills. And because they were locked down and away from each other and having to do school digitally and not interacting with each other in person, that so many of them don't really understand how to communicate with each other in person. And it's a problem for millennials. We have that problem. I hate talking on the phone. I really don't want to talk to you if I can help it. And I can't even imagine, the most important developmental years of my life in like middle school and high school, and having to be completely, bugs just having a good time, having to be completely isolated from my fellow humans. We're naturally social creatures, and we need social interaction. We need physical connection with each other. And COVID really did a number on all of us. But going down the rabbit hole that I did today and understanding, the way that our brains develop, and how going through COVID during a time in which your brain is developing, in middle school and high school, and having to deal with the fallout and the circumstances of that the global pandemic and the shutdown, and what that did to their brain development is just not something that we're ever going to know. At least right now, it's going to take years for us to be able to study and better understand the impact that the global pandemic had on all of us, but specifically Gen Z. I always come into these videos with a general idea of what I want to talk about, and I think I nailed everything I wanted to talk about. But in case I didn't, in case this didn't make any sense, COVID fucked us up, man.